This podcast is to cover the second part in the series about how the Scrum Master serves the product owner. And the method we're going to use for this is we're going to walk through each factual bullet point from the Scrum Guide. There are 4 bullet points in the Scrum Guide, and I'm going to ask 2 questions. I'm going to ask for an example, and then I'm going to ask who does this bullet point, or the pieces of the bullet point, in the case where the bullet point divides into several other subsections. Who does it when there is no Scrum Master in the organization? Because there are some people on the internet who angrily protest that a Scrum Master is not a full-time position, is not needed. So if you're a Scrum Master and you have to deal with these people, this is the podcast for you.
And if you haven't seen our first podcast, go check it out.
Or our third podcast. Check that out too. Let's start with, so the Scrum Master serves the product owner in several ways, including the first item, helping find techniques for effective product goal definition and product backlog management. That's a mouthful.
There's quite a lot there. So helping find techniques for effective product goal definition. I think the focus is more on this now with the latest Scrum Guide that encourages setting goals, especially for the sprint. And so people are thinking more around goal orientation, right? What are we trying to do? Techniques for effective product goal definition. That kind of assumes that the product side of the house isn't proficient at outlining goals, right? I haven't found traditionally that to be necessarily a challenge, but I guess it varies from organization to organization. How does the Scrum Master serve the product owner in effective product goal definition? And how does the Scrum Master serve the product owner in product backlog management?
Yep.
That latter part, backlog management, is really about keeping hygiene around the backlog and making sure there's just enough, but not too much, right? Because if you have a very deep backlog, some product owners will say, look at my backlog, it's awesome, I have 200 items in there. Oof. And it's like, okay, well, it's like filling your fridge with 200 fresh vegetables and fruit, right? It's all good for you, except it becomes stale. You can't use it all. Right. An effective Scrum Master would kind of advise that, right, of the product owner. The first part is a little trickier for me because product goal definition should be driven from product. And the Scrum Master can simply be how can I put this? Somebody who just vets that and says, does it make sense as a goal? Is it too big? Is it too small? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this?
When I think of the product goal, I think of the product goal being typically something that is done before we ever even start building, and something that potentially can be changed or adapted to some extent, but usually doesn't move all that much, at least as we're doing larger development. So speaking to the product goal exclusively, I think it depends on when they're coming in, because a product goal is something that we need to be aware of in regards to defining, but I don't see that is something that is, and then we need to work towards, but I don't see that that's something that needs to be constantly iterated on or needs to be adapted on a regular basis, unlike the sprint goal, which changes sometimes regularly every sprint or very frequently. So what I think from a Scrum Master perspective is if they happen to be there in the beginning, right, they definitely need to help whomever is involved with creating that product goal, which is going to be I'm assuming a large group of stakeholders, not just product. We're going to have a lot of people that are going to be inputting in this, and a Scrum Master's role in that is to help that group of stakeholders, probably many of which aren't going to necessarily understand what that product goal potentially should look like when we're thinking about this being a far longer term goal as opposed to a short term. So helping that group of stakeholders, which obviously would include product management, product owners. So I see them more as a facilitator in that regard. In regards to the product backlog management, I see them being able to be that, so using the term rubber ducking, so helping the product owner or product manager really talk through that backlog or talk through the prioritization, and maybe sometimes just getting that other perspective. So here's what I'm thinking, anything that you're aware of, and a lot of times the Scrum Masters are privy to other teams and are potentially reporting in other manners, and so may be able to really give some additional input in regards to that backlog management and prioritization.
I just thought of something as you were talking there. Product goal definition. I think it depends on the context. I go back to that. If you're a Scrum Master on a team or a bunch of teams at a company like Boeing, we were talking about that earlier, right? To what extent can you make an impact? Techniques for product goal definition. I mean, product goals are way above you at that point. So you don't really even influence that because there's so many other things that impinge on it. Regulatory, safety regulations, compliance, security, all of those things. So you really don't have much of a pull. All you can do is look for clarity in the goals. Make sure they're clear, make sure they're measurable, right? Same thing with the product backlog management. You have to do the things you have to do. But as you were saying, is the backlog in a good state? Is it too deep? Is it emergent enough, or is it static? And again, it should be emergent, but in my example, it's not as emergent because they know the things we have to do. Those are it. You can't just say, well, we'll figure it out. It doesn't work that way because you're building an airplane. Lives are at stake. So I think it's contextual in certain cases. If you're just building software in a typical software product organization, then perhaps you can have a bit more of an impact.
I'm trying to go along with you. So we're talking about the Scrum Master.
Yes.
So I have to take a step back with my little product owner hat on for a second, because as a product owner for Boeing, for example, for the aircraft manufacturer, for example, I am the product owner for the avionics systems, or I am the product owner for the hydraulic systems of the aircraft, a product owner for metallurgy. I don't know what the different departments would be.
There's got 50
right?
of them.
The airframe, for example. Sure. I am concentrated with my team on doing very important, very critical things for my components on the aircraft. And I'm not lobbying for component-based teams. However, we're talking about the Scrum Master who reaches out in the organization with a one organization vision in their head. This person has to be bringing techniques to take the individual product people in their individual areas and be pulling them into some sort of forum or venue where they are talking to each other to not get so far ahead of each other and be lining up to where the goal that everyone aligns to, that everyone is continuing to contribute to that goal. That's where I'm going with that. So when you it's you serve product. That's what this category is about. You serve product the best when, yes, you are helping your individual team because you probably got hired on one individual team, but you're keeping the whole system in mind and keeping everyone in line. This might require you to reach out to other Scrum Masters on other teams that are serving other teams, and they might be way more myopic about what they're doing than you are, right? Because of different experience levels and alignment in the organization, stuff like that. But when I look at this bullet point and I listen to your examples, and I think of give me an example of this. And if you're going to use aircraft manufacturing is a great example of this because it's so difficult.
It is.
It's so difficult for people to immediately break into component teams of my development team's over here, my QA team's over here, my business requirements team is over here, and they're all separate and they all got to be completely done. But that's not what we're saying. People can be assured that everything that goes into to producing the metal that goes on this aircraft is the best it can be, and it lines up with what the engine people need, what the fuselage people need, what the frame people need. But if you have somebody who is continuing to push you to take a system approach to all the individual components, I feel that's what this individual bullet point is talking about, helping find techniques to more effectively do that. I think a product person is in this position. I think what is your chief product person or your group product person doing, if not aligning your product people to be like, hey, let's all get on the same page. This is saying a Scrum Master is sharing some of that responsibility.
I think both, right? So yes, of course, your product organization is doing that. They're not developing in silos or even conceptualizing the product in silos. But here, to this bullet, a Scrum Master on any one of these teams would be looking at dependency management, because your team is producing one little widget that's going to fit into the bigger whole. And you can be finished, but nobody can consume that, or you're behind because everyone's waiting on you. Yeah. So that synchronization needs to happen. But how they help product here is making sure that the right level of quality testing is happening on everything. It start with your own team, but integrating in with the next team and then the next team. At every level, there's testing going on. And it's the Scrum Master who makes sure that that is included as work items. Don't take on too much development, whatever that may look like, in your sprint, because you have to test. You have to integrate with your downstream and test, and then provide that to your upstream. That happens throughout, whether you're talking about fuselage or propulsion systems or engine, throughout, right? And then you have what they call cross-cutting technologies, avionics. Well, where does that fall? It falls across everything. So then what the Scrum Master would be doing is looking at what their team is doing. Let's take a specific example. Let's say that their team is working on a hydraulic system. And even that is broken down into multiple, but let's simplify it. It's hydraulics. So what do? When their team has something finished as a finished product, all right, do they deliver that? A savvy Scrum Master would say, this is one piece of it, but for our piece to work, it needs the corresponding software, right? Which is the avionics piece. Let's integrate that in. But don't do it after you've developed your hydraulics. Build it in from the beginning so your backlog reflects that. So have it integrated in. And when you test it and everything's working good, at that point you could say, we're ready to integrate this upstream. But at the same time, you're also keeping your eye on what is coming next, right? Because your downstream is ready to deliver. So it's on a flow, and the Scrum Master is helping product by making sure they know what needs to be in the backlog. Hey, we don't have this in the backlog right now, or it's way lower, but it's coming up in the next sprint, right? So bring that to visibility.
I think something that we're assuming, but I just want to call out, and that is assuming that there is even a product goal, right? So, and if there is, right, and honestly, right? So assuming that there is a product goal, and if there isn't, so what then are the techniques for creating an effective product goal? Who do we need to get involved in that conversation?
I feel like you hit a huge, I don't know what to call it, a huge problem, a challenge, a Titanic-sized issue, which is, what if you're the what if you're the Scrum Master and you highlight that the product people have no strategy to hook into to create a product goal, because the leadership is not directing a strategy down to your product people, and therefore your product people have no goal to hook into to bring to the teams. This is both an example of giving an example of a real world problem, and also an example of who does this when there's no Scrum Master.
Right.
Who in your organization highlights and challenges leadership, because that's where the strategy should come from. Who challenges leadership in the organization without a Scrum Master? I want to ask this question specifically before we go on. Who challenges leadership specifically and says, you have no strategy? We need a strategy before the development teams continue like creating random software. I don't even know why you're creating software at that point if you have no strategy. I guess I have two questions. How would you deal with that as a Scrum Master? Not a product person.
Sure.
A Scrum Master. How would you deal with that as a Scrum Master? And how would you deal with that in an organization where they don't have the Scrum Master?
As a Scrum Master, if you're aware that there is no strategy, right? How would you deal with that? You do have to pull out you have to pull the chain in that TPS or Toyota Production System model, right?
Not TPS reports.
Not TPS reports. Yeah, just pull the chain and say, listen, we're running, but we don't know which direction we're going in. Much less where are we going. So how will we know when we got there, right? So let's ask that question, and a Scrum Master has to do that. So I'm going to fast forward quickly here. Right?
Well, like, welcome to working in a leadership position. Like
exactly.
You're part of the leadership team. If your organization wants to claim you have a leadership team, not just a bunch of executives who are all running in different directions, if you really want to claim you have a leadership team, the Scrum Master, welcome to being part of the leadership apparatus of the organization.
Right.
Anybody on that leadership apparatus should be able to say, hey, this strategy is not working, or this strategy is not as clear as you think it is.
Any of the above. Yeah, absolutely. In an organization where there is no Scrum Master and who does this, you hope somebody would do it. If you're looking at the dev team, listen, it could be a developer who's savvy enough, who's worked with some experience, right? Who says, we'll keep building this stuff, but we don't know why. And they would raise it to somebody, one hopes. There's no Scrum Master though. So who does that? Maybe the product person does it. If there's no Scrum Master, a developer could do it, an architect, even a tester. Anyone can do it, but who does it? haven't come across that before.
Salespeople
You know,
do it.
salespeople will do it with their own interest at heart.
Yes.
That's the
If they're
that's the
incentivized.
difference. This strategy is not good.
Well-
but hey, look, I'm gonna get my commission in 6 weeks when I sell this.
I mean, that's helping find techniques for effective product goal definition and product backlog management. Like, if you're an organization that is a hardcore sales-led organization, the salespeople bring your development team things to do. You implement the projects, bang out a piece of software. It's a one-time thing, stands alone, doesn't integrate with anything else you do. It's just for that customer. You knock it out and you're done. I mean, basically, you don't really have a strategy. It was whatever your sales team brings you to bring money in, that's your strategy.
You've built a liability. Now you got to support that one off, right? For the foreseeable future. But it's not the salesman's problem or sales lady's problem.
I mean,
they made their commission.
Yeah, I can't. I mean, I kind of can blame them, but also, like, I can't. Organizationally speaking, as a system, I can't really blame them, because that's what
they encourage. So,
yes, that's
what they reward, right? We talked about that in another podcast. It's the reward system of the organization. But if that's how they reward it.
And I feel there will be people listening to this saying, like, oh, that's my organization. Sales goes out and sells a feature that my software can't do. And, you know, the product challenge to that is, well, are you giving them a roadmap and telling them these are the upcoming things, these are the things you should sell? And are you bringing them into the conversation of building a roadmap together, or are you cutting them out of that because you're afraid they're going to disagree with you? And if that's the case, now we have an issue with product discovery. Now we have an issue with what we're talking about here. The bullet point number 1, effective product goal definition and product backlog management. If you're in a sales-led organization and sales is basically leading your development team along the way, and you're not in charge of where your product backlog is going, it's because you don't have an effective way to tell them these are things coming up for you to sell. What they're saying is, these are things that I am able to sell from my conversation with the customers. Now you must build them. So you need to reverse what's happening, and you need to reverse that by talking to them and having more dialogue and having more understanding of what. I guess where I'm going with this is more empathy. That's where I'm going to shortcut. I'm going to hotwire this conversation. You need to have more empathy for where your customers are and where your sales team is trying to take them. Build all that together.
Specifically, though, I agree. First of all, but with the Scrum Master's role,
it's a tough, Scrum Master,
right? So one thing they could do, one thing they might potentially consider, is to shorten the value chain and talk to the salespeople and say, bring the customer in.
Yeah.
Let's talk to them collectively, not you go talk and sell whatever you want and tell us to deliver. Bring them together and say, what can we build? What are your needs? Listen to them. Right, and then build the appropriate solution rather than build something and hope it fits.
The pertinent word, and you said this earlier, Brian, is literally one word in that sentence, and that is techniques. Scrum Master is responsible not for creating a product backlog and not for managing a product backlog, but for understanding what those are and for helping the product owner with techniques for making those effective. And what you've described, and both of you have mentioned multiple ways and techniques of actually doing that. So being closer to sales, bringing the customers in, making sure sales are part of the sprint review. So that giving them the opportunity, let them sit out a few times and then go, you know what? Hey, we actually demonstrated this. We had a customer using it in our review last sprint or 2 sprints ago. It's an event that you've been invited to. So those are techniques that the Scrum Master could potentially bring to the product owner to advocate for themselves. So the Scrum Master doesn't need to even be the one doing these things.
Right.
They're helping the product owner, the product person at this point. So being aware, advocating, and helping them to understand how they may make tangible some of these actual techniques. And you guys mentioned several of them. But so it's that techniques and the communication and kind of the back and forth between the product owner and the Scrum Master.
Sometimes you can't just read about these. I have an anecdote to share about this. Some time ago when I was a young Scrum Master, one of the things that came out was in a sales-led organization, I might add, a global one. They built great products. Unfortunately, customers didn't like them. And there was a gap there. So we knew there was a customer or user forum, whatever they call it, user conference. That's what they called it, right? Every year there'd be a user conference in a different part of the world. And so, okay, this is great because we have the users getting together. And what the company was doing is they would be hosting it in a hotel somewhere. The users come in, they get treated, all of that stuff, right? Nice food. And there was maybe an hour of where, okay, what are your pain points, right? And who was in that discussion was critical from our company at the time. It was project managers. It was customer service people that dealt with customers day in, day out. But nobody on the leadership level was in that hour-long meeting. 2 days, 1 hour, nobody was there. And then the rest of the time, it was between entertaining, right? The rest of the time was, well, it's a showcase, right? So here's product X. Here's what we're planning for you.
Right.
This is coming out next quarter. This is coming out 6 months. So I'm like, okay, this is a wasted opportunity, right? So what we did is we turned that on its head. And we said, instead of that hour, we're going to let customers talk to one another. And we will pull out. We won't be in that conference room. Yeah. We'll completely pull out as a company. So the company is not even there, right? And the customers are there. They talk to each other, but they are given a goal. Their goal is at the end of that 3-4 hour session that they have at the second half of the first day, they come out with a top 10 of issues that they're facing that they want us as a company to address. And the next day, they send that to us, right? So the next day, we, of course, work in the evenings to discuss this as a company. Sure. Next day, we come in and share our plans to address those or to not address those, right? So who does that, though? Not the engineers, not the project managers. Now we want leadership to come in and say, here are the 10 things you customers told us. And they're on a big screen. And with a laser pointer, we went through each one and said, explain to us why. Why is this number one?
Yeah.
We're not going to take it at face value just because somebody said so. Why? Why is this one? Why is this two? Why is this three? And at the end of that, with that understanding, a commitment, a verbal commitment was made. We will address number 1 and 2 in the next quarter. We can't tell you when we'll get to 3. We'll talk about that. Yeah. Well, let's stay in touch, right? So there was no overpromising. We're not going to fix everything, right? We're going to fix the top 2 pain points in the next quarter. Users felt so much better because they're going to get their biggest issues solved in 3 months. Yeah. That is a huge change from where we were a year ago, right? And as a Scrum Master, I feel pretty proud of having just facilitated this whole thing. I wasn't involved. I wasn't even committed, to be honest, right? The only thing that was the hardest part for me out of all this is to convince the company to pull out. They're like, but this is no, it's not our user conference. Think of the words, user conference. Where does it say our name in there? It doesn't. Pull out, leave them be. That was the hardest part with leadership. Like, you're going to leave them alone? Oh, they'll come up with all kinds of things. Exactly. We want them to.
Imagine if they did that with their teams. Ooh,
I know.
Oh, wow. I mean, it's
so
a novel concept.
A little sidebar. But anyway, yeah, so Scrum Masters can do a lot. Just think outside the box.
Who does finding techniques for product goal definition? Who does finding techniques for product backlog management? Who does that when there's no Scrum Master? Aside from the product manager, like it's all in the product managers to be like, hey, go figure out new ways to do your job or new ways to be effective throughout the organization.
Who does it in real life? Very few people.
I would separate that into 2. I would say that product backlog management, the most sensible, if the Scrum Master is not available, is obviously is product manager owner. And if they're not available, I think given what you were saying there is the dev team. I mean, they're the closest to and should hopefully have had communication and have some understanding of what's coming up in the backlog if we're having some refinements and things like that.
Think of it from the perspective of like we've just gone through an Agile transformation and we don't have Scrum Masters. Who participates in helping make sure that we've effectively communicated product goals?
So goals was something separate, I was going to say. So goals,
yeah,
I think
they are separate, yeah.
Yeah, so yes, I kind of took the backlog separate, and I thought that was the easier one. But from a goal definition perspective, that, to your point earlier, really should filter down from leadership and be based on the strategy. If we're going through an Agile transformation, the assumption is that we have people invested in leadership that want to make this happen. The point is,
you can see I want to jump in.
In an ideal world, there's a lot of stakeholders, but that product goal should be driven from the vision or goal of the organization. And a lot of stakeholders could be involved in that, but it should be driven ultimately from leadership.
This is the organization that's done agile transformation and decided not to hire the people that can make it happen.
I agree with all y'all. And blink twice if you're in pain and you've been traumatized by not having a strategy. I agree with you. That's what should happen. And I think everyone probably has been in an organization where things worked. Well, maybe not everyone, but I know for a fact that Ohm has been in an organization where things were working, and then they changed leadership to somebody who really didn't get it, and now you feel like you're back to square one, where there's no vision coming down from your leadership. So you're in the product position of saying, my product goal should be extrapolated down from the organizational level, and in some way, shape, or form, from the vision. And now it's not, for whatever reason. And all of this is super easy to say, well, I got my little silo. This is a product problem.
Right.
Somebody else's job, leadership job, product owner's job. Okay. But we're not talking about any of those people today. We're talking about the Scrum Master today. So the Scrum Master has to have techniques to coach up in the organization, which we might talk about this on a separate podcast, which may or may not come after this podcast.
Certainly will.
Maybe, I don't know.
Unless it doesn't.
Where they're empowered to climb in the organization at whatever level they need to climb to, all the way to the top. Whatever. Doesn't matter. To say, we have an issue with, we are not getting the vision that we need. I'm only speaking from my experience. A lot of times, the issue here that I've observed is the person in the role of the Scrum Master is, I don't know if afraid is a good way to say it, but they are not confident that it is their job to climb all the way up in the organization as far as I can go to get their problem resolved. I should take this back to experience. I was a product person in the organization, but I also was charged with the Agile implementation. So it was like a pseudo Agile coach, but I was a product manager in that organization. They did have they brought on a Scrum Master after I started to do that job full time, because it was a full time job. And in that organization, I can't even remember why I was telling this story. Because in that organization, I felt empowered to coach all the way up to the top, to the CEO level. Okay, but I could clearly see other Scrum Masters saying, "Oh, well, these people don't want to talk to me, or they don't want to listen to what I'm saying." Where people feel disempowered, where people don't feel like what they would say or what they would recommend is taken into consideration,
or even heard,
taken seriously. There's a lot of different things. Yeah. And what I'm trying to wrap this bullet point up about finding techniques for effective product goal definition. If you cannot extrapolate a strategy, you need to climb in the organization, potentially to the very top, to say, hey, we're having difficulty figuring out what our strategy is. That's kind of where I'm going with this. And this might not be useful to people listening to the podcast, because they might say, like, well, I'm at this giant multinational corporation. I'm not going to go ask the CEO.
Well, you don't have to go all the way to the CEO in that kind of an organization, right? You can go as high as you can. So I would say, yeah, definitely one of the techniques, since that's the bullet point we're talking about, is, first of all, don't be afraid to coach up, right? Get out there and go up. But if you're saying, oh, I can't get to my VP because his calendar's full for the next month, go stake out outside their office. Guerrilla tactics.
I want to say, for people who are scared of trying to coach to that level, this is a product goal. This is strategy. This is something you should expect to be coming down at every level in the leadership. They should be repeating the strategy. Every level, if we go back to the John Kotter book,
sure,
everybody should be repeating the strategy. So it shouldn't be a guess. It should be like, oh my goodness, I've heard this so many times. This is the last thing I need to hear more about.
The Scrum Master needs to be really empowered and not intimidated, right? To be able to be comfortable in that coaching up. So they need to be also given the coaching and encouragement, and even the opportunity and potential kind of help, maybe from a fellow or more seasoned Scrum Master or an Agile coach, so to get their feet wet in doing that. But I think all of this is really wonderful sounding, and in an ideal world, but it speaks to the culture of the organization, right? So if we have a Scrum Master that is empowered to speak up to leadership, then we probably have empowered teams as well, and we have a good culture. But I think that that's not necessarily the case in a lot of places, and Scrum Masters are squashed along with a lot of other people.
All right. So second bullet out of 4.
Okay, second bullet, helping the Scrum team understand the need for clear and concise product backlog items. I feel this item encapsulates a good deal of the BA skill set. Like the idea of, and this is one that I deal with a fair bit of time as well. Sometimes I'll split items for developers and say, hey, we need to do feature A, but like this tiny subset of feature A is not important. We'll do that as a separate item. And they'll say, well, it's really easy to do together. Why don't we just keep it all together? And like, because vertical slicing, because we need to take a little bit of everything. I'm like, well, since we're in that piece of the code, so sometimes it's negotiating with the business, but in my experience, a lot of times, especially if you're with teams that don't have a lot of experience with writing stories and breaking down requests from users, this could be going back and forth with the team too. Clear and concise. Clear and concise also means, to me, in the product position, you don't start working on things that have blockers that are not ready for you to work on. And also, you don't work on things that have not been vetted through some kind of discovery process, which is it's like a pseudo involved in this. So we can take that one offline for a second.
Let them figure it out during a sprint maybe. But yeah, I agree with that. I think you hit that one on the head. I think the other thing that a Scrum team needs to understand clear and concise product backlog items. Where the Scrum Master comes in is, if you don't have a BA specifically, is to encourage the team to not start work on something that's vague or something that has a dependency. Flip side of that, encourage the product owner to say, you prioritize this high, however, we can't work on it because there's missing information, there's a dependency on the external teams or internal, whatever it is, right? Make that visible ahead of time. And there are techniques. I don't think we're talking about techniques in this bullet, but there are techniques they can deploy here. Like making sure you use things like definition of ready and so forth, right? To make sure that things are known enough.
Well, sometimes I like the shortcut definition of ready, because definition of ready could be contentious for some people, because they're like, oh, you're just scope creeping or whatever. That's probably why it hasn't made its way into the Scrum Guide definition of ready. But I like to think about this one as like, if you can't get unanimous approval from your team to say this item is ready for us to work on. I've seen some teams who go as far to put a status in their ALM tool of refined. This is something to indicate that the team has agreed that this item is refined and ready to be pulled into any sprint. That it basically indicates that the discovery work is at an end. The team knows how they are going to implement this, and they are ready. Or maybe they don't know, but the team is ready to talk about implementing this, basically.
A state or a tag or maybe a confidence vote, right? Anything 4 and above.
Confidence vote, right.
In my experience, one of the ways that teams have done this, and this was a suggestion of the Scrum Master, was we use story points on this particular team, and once it was ready, and not until it was ready would we point a story. So if it had points, that means it was ready. So that's what we used.
I can see that.
So that's what we used.
I can see that, but it would be also good, only because I'm in the middle of doing this right now where I work. It would be also good to reflect that somehow in the status of the item. I'm trying not to get into a waterfall here, but it would be good to align at a feature level to say, we can't begin implementing this functionality that we know is going to take a while to implement or whatever until certain questions are answered. The product person, I know we're talking about Scrum Master, the product person, would like to have some kind of indicator to see on a Kanban board at a high level, at a leadership level, or at a product level. I'll say the product level. We're producing a mobile app. Functionality A, we know every customer wants, every customer needs. We've got these surveys, this testing, whatever we did, that proves we want to do this. Functionality B, we've put some surveys out there. We got some details that we don't have enough yet. We've got maybe like 20% of people responding to it. That's not enough for us to spend money on this. Functionality C, some executives said they really want We're bringing it into our discovery process to see if it's actually worth it, if people are using it, if we're validating. We're validating that we actually need to do that. So I would like to see on I think of a Kanban board, right? On some type of board somewhere. At a high level, this thing's been vetted and we approved it. This thing's been vetted and we still need some more experiments, some more evidence. Yeah. And this thing, we vetted it and it failed our vetting process. We don't see any reason we should implement that. There's no dollars there. There's no customer engagement. It's a good idea, but there's no tangible benefit. I want to see that before I invest dollars from the development team. I know I went way off the rails to say the need for a clear and concise product backlog item. The next bullet point is helping establish empirical product planning for a complex environment. Everything I just described, if you, the Scrum Master, can take everything that I, the product manager, am doing, whatever. If you can take everything that I'm doing, there, I made it a contraction so I can skate out of that one. If you can take everything I'm doing and put it on a board that shows A to B to C. A, I need to try something. B, I'm trying to do something. C, it worked or it didn't work. If you, the Scrum Master, can figure out a way to visualize my work and make it transparent to leadership, myself, quite honestly, and the other product managers, and the team, you've helped me considerably. Because I know most product people, again, only my experience, I'm only speaking from my experience, they do this work I'm talking about.
Yep.
Hey, I need to do some A/B testing. Hey, I need to survey some users. Hey, I need to figure out if there's an appetite for this functionality. But they don't necessarily show it to everyone, and they don't necessarily bring it up at reviews every backlog refinement or whatever. They're not necessarily showing that work. In fact, I would say they're probably trying to hide the work that fails through this process from the team, so the team's not distracted on this stuff. They get back to the development stuff. Which I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm not making a statement about that. I'm just saying if I had a Scrum Master who could show this stuff to show the team, hey, here's the product vision. Here's the direction we want to go. Here's what your product manager is trying to do. And here's what makes it through the funnel. Now here's what you need to do. I feel that would be that would make everyone feel a lot better about where they're at.
What you're describing sounds pretty close, if not exactly the same as a lean business case. Where these things are. Yeah. What's the market need, right? What are potentially our markets? What kind of benefit will we get from this? Is it greater adoption, bigger market share, higher revenues, whatever it is? Right. All of that work should be done, but if it's not being done, a Scrum Master can help by providing that framework. They may not be able to fill out the details, but they can provide the framework to those that matter and say, these are the things we need. So that's where they can really help. Yeah. If you're a product person, somebody came to you and said, here's a structured way to do this, an easy way to do this, right? Great. It can be simple as well. It can be just a spreadsheet that they've shared, which has those relevant details on. You can download these things too from various websites. But that's the sort of thing that I think where a Scrum Master can add value.
I agree. I think that where they aren't necessarily the most appropriate person in my mind to do this, right? So doing market analysis, but being aware and having some experience in how to do this and how to potentially display this, to your point, so that it makes sense across the board. So from product to leadership and development team, so on and so forth, and creates ultimately that transparency, right? So they're the translator or the Scrum whisperer, right? The translator of Scrum. Right. So finding tools and opportunities and ways and experimenting in different ways to find opportunities to create that transparency, I think is perfectly aligned with what a Scrum Master should be doing. In regards to just the clear and concise language, those three words, clear and concise.
Yeah, I want to go back to that too.
Yeah, it's very ambiguous and can be used, in my experience. So remember, I am coming from not a development background. So when it comes to writing stories, I am absolutely writing them from a user problem perspective. Yeah. Here's my problem. I'm not going to, or I'm trying really hard not to put in any resolution. Obviously, I don't have the ability to write in particular code or say which database to go to or whatever. But even so far as to say, I'd like to have a modal, or I'd like to, I need to be aware of those things and say, nope, I'm not going to ask for particular things as whatever user I need to solve this problem. But clear and concise can sometimes be translated to really detailed, explicit instructional stories or whatever it is that you happen to be using.
That wouldn't be concise then.
Mm-hmm.
That wouldn't be concise, right? If it's explicit, detailed, that's the opposite.
I mean,
of concise.
Concise is that, right?
Concise is succinct, short, right to the point. As a user, I need this, not. And you could go a little further.
I think you could. What I'm thinking is almost bullet pointing that out. So each of one of these are clear. One of these are clear and concise.
I think you're saying the same
thing.
Yeah. So I mean, I've seen this really become almost this anti-pattern where developers who are usually incentivized to be fed information and to not not in an organization that is really embracing and empowering teams to be innovative.
No, I'm with you on this one because I went through this recently because my team was doing a bunch of UI changes, and I worked on mobile apps for a good part of my career. So I have a real strong opinion on user interface. Because again, working on mobile apps, you get beat up by users in the app stores.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. If your UI sucks, I mean, you'll find out real quick. And sometimes, I say sometimes to not get in fights on the internet with random people. But reality is sometimes the developer will tell you like, oh, we just need a drop down for this or whatever. And I'm like, if you're adding a drop down or like a radio button or something like that, I was like, if you're adding that, it's going to look different on Android and iOS. Have you really thought about the user's flow? They have to press a drop down button, and that sends them to basically another screen to choose either of the things. Like, have you really thought about this? Okay. And then obviously, like, depending on the organization, you might lose those fights.
Right.
And then get beat up in the app store for every fight that you lost. You knew it wasn't something good to compromise on in the first place. So, like, clear and concise. Why I bring this up is, for me, there's a part of me as a product person. Again, we're talking about Scrum Masters, but I'm weighing in as a product person.
Sure.
There's a part of me as a product person coming from my background working on development teams where I can take a UI and I can mock it up how I think the UI should flow to the user. Mm-hmm. And I can give that to the development team. Okay, the minute I do that, and I do that for every UI screen, like, am I now leading the development team? Am I taking away from the development team's discussion of the best way?
Yeah.
I will tell you, my personal preference is to give them nothing. Just to write the story to say the user should do X, which should lead the user to doing Y, which should lead the user to doing Z.
So
or Z if we're in the UK.
Yeah, you're saying what, not how.
You're right. Yeah, right.
I agree with that. I think there's also value in giving that to the team and then giving them enough rope to come back with and say, well, here's a quick Figma mockup or DX mockup, right? How does this look? And that's where, if I was wearing your hat as a product person, I would say, okay, but let's get some real feedback from the customer, right? And then give them that and say, yeah, between these two. So come up with approaches, not a singular approach, maybe one or two. And these are quick to mock up, I have to say, right? I mean, it takes minutes to come up with this stuff.
In that working environment, you have to be okay with purposefully, as a product person, staying out of it and letting the development team talk to the users and get feedback that you expect is going to come. I feel the more project management-y people in the room will say, why are you going to let the development team intentionally fail in front of the customers when you know that they don't want radio buttons or whatever? They don't want to drop down in their workflow that interrupts their workflow and then goes back and whatever. They just want radio buttons to quickly click through or whatever. Like, you, the product person, highly suspect. I mean, the aside from you should be doing some A/B testing and running some metrics like that to get real metrics along the way before you implement your permanent solution. You might be in an organization where, again, sales, VP, somebody else is driving you to be like, you got to get it done by this date. You only have 2 weeks to try and implement. So whatever you can try and implement in this 2 weeks is what you can do. So you don't have much time for A/B testing. Like, again, I'm not saying these are good excuses for shortcutting the process. The bullet point here is helping establish empirical product planning in a complex environment. Okay, this is a Scrum Master, by the way. So the Scrum Master is saying, I know the VP said they want to buy XYZ date, whatever, Z date, Z date, but the best way to figure out what the users really want is to do this A/B test where we develop A and we develop B and we push 50% users to A, 50% users to B and get some metrics. In order to do that, we have to implement A and B. We need to go through this process. So the Scrum Master has to talk to, in that example, the executives who demanded the feature, the users who are using the feature, both Pool A and Pool B. They need to coach the product person. Hey, I know you're under a lot of pressure, but the right thing to do in this scenario is some A/B testing. They need to talk to developers to make sure that the backend is instrumented to do A/B testing. So, there is some block and tackling here on the Scrum Master's part that, quite honestly, like, I don't know if it has anything to do with Scrum Mastery in the first place, but it's like everything I just said is like could be very critical to a new feature, you know?
Yeah, and since we're talking about the role of a Scrum Master here, right? They should be doing those things and facilitating that. But the flip side of that question is, who does it when they're not there?
Oh.
Right?
I'm going to roll it into empirical product planning for a complex environment to say, if you've not previously thought about how you're going to measure success across your users, across your environment you roll this out to, you really need to consider that as step one before anything else. And this is the weirdest part about this is it's a Scrum Master bringing this to the conversation, because this is not something I would expect. I, as the product person, would expect to come from the Scrum Master. You know, hey, how have you really thought about if this truly solves a customer experience on Android? If this truly solves a customer experience on iOS?
So I'd say that a lot of the examples that you've given in are of potential opportunities for a Scrum Master to step in and help and be helpful are really going to require a lot of experience from a Scrum Master. And it almost sounds to me, to some extent, a lot of times this may be a Scrum Master that's more experienced or has more longevity in product than the product owner, right? And so they're really being that crutch for a newer product owner or product manager.
Who does this when there's no Scrum Master?
So the empirical product planning? That's so huge.
I'm asking this question per category because there is a ton of people on the internet being super combative, looking to nitpick and get views via low-hanging fruit about this kind of stuff. Like, they're like, well, I don't see a need for a Scrum Master. No development team ever needs a Scrum Master. It's totally a part-time role. Totes my goats. There's a lot of people saying this and repeating this on the internet. I mean, I guess you have to really lean on the product people to do this. If there's no Scrum Master in your organization, your product people really need to sign on to, I'm going to defend my decisions and my entire team's decisions to try things and adjust depending on the outcome. I was going to say fail, but that's so cliche to say fail quickly or whatever. But I'm really going to defend my team's ability to try things quickly and adjust. I do this with my teams where I mark in the system of we're doing this task specifically so we can learn how this new technology works. I have a category for that for work items. So I can track at the end of the sprint, X percentage of our effort went into learning new things and trying new things. It's not going to give you a deliverable to the business. It's basically like you can shuffle that into your training bucket if you have a training bucket.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that certain frameworks promote, right? So innovation, basically.
Architectural runway, stuff like that.
Exactly. Yeah. Who does this when the Scrum Master is not there? You mentioned the product side, but I've also seen, especially on software development team, the architects driving this. They would say, well, we're clear on where we need to go. There's a gap here. There's no Scrum Master. So team, you're working on this now. Yeah, so the architect drives that sometimes. One hopes it's a temporary measure, but yes.
I have seen, in my career, I've seen team leads, development leads, what do you want to call them?
Yeah.
just short.
Architect.
Architect could be just short of manager. Manager development's a little bit too high level for what I'm talking about. But I've seen team leads or senior individuals on each team do this.
Senior devs, perhaps.
Yes, senior dev. Right. One or two on each, depending on the size of the team. I've seen them be tapped to do this. But by the time you get up to a manager or a director or whatever development, I don't think they really do this full time.
They don't. In the matrix environment, they're not even close to the team anyway.
So when you are both speaking to empirical product planning, I just want to make sure we're all aligned on what we're understanding that to mean. So when you say empirical product planning, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, so for me, that means that planning just enough product and then vetting what you've planned, right? So making sure that you're basically coming up with evidence that what you're deploying or developing according to that plan is actually working for you. If not, you pivot. That's what it means to me.
Same?
Yeah.
So I was thinking
evidence-based. Yeah.
So,
exactly.
And I was thinking maybe a little more broadly. So when I'm thinking about product planning for a complex environment, I'm thinking about things like roadmap and even persona to some extent. We could get some empirical information out of there. And then thinking about, okay, who's involved? I'll specifically think about roadmap. So when I was thinking about that from a product planning perspective, Scrum Master could be very helpful in facilitating, especially facilitating that type of a meeting or planning. But if they're not there, that's kind of a large group of stakeholders. So we would have product and enterprise architecture and potentially user experience and developers and sales and marketing. I mean, there could be a lot of people involved in that. Sure. And so if Scrum Master isn't there could be a lot of people potentially helping to establish that empirical product plan. And it could be, we can really narrow that down from a roadmap to something far smaller and more measurable. Not sure, but that's kind of the way I was thinking about it.
I don't think they're too far apart, really, from what we're saying. I think my vision was something a little bit narrower than a full-fledged product plan. On a time horizon, it would be closer rather than distant, right? So more like coming up with features for the next PI or next few sprints.
Yeah. So we're getting into
huge contextual.
Yeah.
Road mapping. We actually talked about doing road mapping for this podcast, but road mapping is a whole separate podcast. The last category is facilitating stakeholder collaboration as requested or needed. I brought this up in the previous podcast, where basically your Scrum Master, again, assuming they're a people person, we're going to go out on a limb and say they like talking to people. They have a extraordinary ability to extend the product owner for the team, product manager, whatever you want to call it, to coordinate and collaborate with stakeholders, to coordinate activities with stakeholders, talk to stakeholders, reach out to them, find out how they're doing, go back and forth with them, that kind of stuff. But also, when I think about dealing with stakeholders, I think about dealing with users. And when I think about dealing with users, I think about this bullet point, facilitating stakeholder collaboration. I think about this bullet point as encompassing a lot of product discovery activity, right? So talking to people, getting their input, figuring out the best way to collaborate with them to get their clean input, their true input on things.
Yeah, filter out noise.
Filter out noise, that kind of stuff. You mean filter out VP demands and stuff from the actual voice of the customer, right, and to let the voice of the customer ring true. Product people probably are already looking for ways to do that as part of their normal job, but this is a Scrum Master helping with that.
Sure.
So I already said under the techniques, under the first bullet point, that techniques to make a more effective product goal and have product backlog items, to vet out product backlog items. You're already helping with that, but now you're also helping facilitate conversations with stakeholders. So this is the magic of the product owner's job on the team, right, that you're helping with. So what is the point of this bullet point? What is the point of facilitating stakeholder collaboration as requested or as needed? Is it you being a second person on the team apart from the product person who can basically do the entire job of stakeholder facilitation? What is it?
This is being a sidekick, I think, to the product person, right? In facilitating specifically. Mm-hmm. But what they're not doing is influencing the discussions. They're facilitating. So how this could look in real life, as simple as making sure that the right stakeholders are present in the sprint review. And further, they're providing the input. They're not just checking a box, especially nowadays. We're remote, you can't see the body language. So oftentimes what I see is stakeholders are invited, some come up, most don't bother. And there's no enforcement there. A Scrum Master would say, look, if you don't show up, we can't get the feedback from you. Right? And if you do show up, we expect feedback from you, good, bad, or ugly. They're enforcing those things. I use the word enforce, but you know what I mean? They're making sure it happens. That's the facilitation piece.
I told somebody recently, I was like, hey, if you can't come to a backlog refinement about the item that you're requesting, I was like, it's cool. It's cool if you can't show up on my backlog refinements happen on certain days. I was like, it's cool if you can't show up on a Wednesday because you're really busy because you're an important person. That means since my sprints start on Thursday, that means the next sprint that we can take your item into is going to be 2 weeks from now on Thursday, assuming you can show up next Wednesday.
Right, exactly.
And they're like, oh no, I'll be there in a hurry because I want my thing to not go out in 2 weeks. Yeah, so like I had that conversation because I'm the product person. I'm very happy to jump in front of my team and totally throw myself on the grenade to make people angry or whatever. Also, I enjoy making people angry on the internet.
Someone has to do it. It's a tough job.
Yeah, somebody has to do it, and Stormy's not doing it. Also, yikes. Also, this is saying, like, the Scrum Master totally could be my hatchet man if I need someone to be.
Yes, for sure. I'm going to say, so this speaks again to that just really close collaboration, that connection. So the best teams that I've worked on, I have had such a fantastic relationship with my Scrum Master. And we do have the opportunity to play that good cop, bad cop, which needs to happen sometimes. I need somebody to be the bad guy. And if it's a customer that I'm working with and I really need to keep a relationship with, and they're not coming to the reviews, it might be that I need that the Scrum Master isn't somebody that's new to them. That's somebody that I am intentionally making sure that is at least known, right? And it's for that purpose, you know? And the other thing is, particularly from a Scrum Master perspective, I think most often the interactions that I am experienced with my Scrum Master having actually are those facilitating those stakeholder collaboration internally between departments, between teams, between leadership, between sales, between marketing, between product owners, like whatever it might be. So certainly being aware of ways in which the need of the connections that need to be made and ways in which to facilitate those things. And who does it? And if they're not there?
Yeah, who does it when there's no Scrum Master?
Everybody. Because so when we're talking about stakeholders, so
anybody should.
Well,
anybody should.
Well, everybody in the sense that who is a stakeholder? Like who is being impacted here, and that depends very much on who the stakeholder is.
Who does it? Who facilitates?
I mean, it's going to be the product owner, because in this case, stakeholder is a very, very broad term. If we don't have a Scrum Master, then the product owner is going to be the one best versed. I think.
I hope so. I'm going to point out though. I hope so, but also I would say sales, project managers,
BAs,
executives. Like this becomes real chaotic when there's not a dedicated product owner to the team and the product. Like this becomes real chaotic to say we need someone to talk to a customer. Actually, the worst case scenario is someone goes and does it on the product owner's behalf and then comes to the product owner after the fact to say, hey, I promise XYZ. Sales does this a lot.
Notorious for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Nothing good can come out of that if there's no Scrum Master there. Let's just put it that way.
Well,
but Scrum Masters aren't going to be working with. I mean, that's something that unfortunately is usually, in my experience, handled after the fact. A Scrum Master isn't working directly with sales, at least preemptively.
The only reason we bring this up is because to take us back to the top of the hour, people asking the question of, what do you do all day? Basically, what's happening here is your Scrum Master is allowing for your product owner to be in more than one place at the same time. Is your organization willing to pay for that? And again, like we're talking about product stuff in this part of the video series, right? We're ignoring the fact that there are other more HR centric things happening that the Scrum Master is also participating in. So now we're talking about the Scrum Master serving product, okay? Serving and extending and empathizing with the product people. Aside from all that, facilitating stakeholder collaboration, why would you give that to the person who has all of the soft skills of dealing with people and really enjoys that? I can't imagine.
Exactly. Who would do that? Yeah.